Hello, everybody. This is a little mini lecture about the Antigone essay assignment. So a few things to say about thinking about that paper. The first thing to say is that we're not a writing class. So in the actual SLE class at Stanford, we do work on writing with our students. But in this particular class, because it's moving so quickly, there's just not a lot of time for that. But it's very important to use writing as a way of reflecting, and we've been doing that during the quarter. So this is just ramping that up a bit to try to pull that thinking about Antigone together in something that looks more like a full essay. The paper will be evaluated in three areas: mechanics, so that's just sentence level stuff, commas and word choice and kind of the basic writing mechanics that you've been learning, I'm sure, in your high school classes. The second category will be evidence. So that's your ability to point to the text for the arguments you're making. So using quotations, talking about actions in the play, what the things you appeal to in order to convince your reader of something. And then the third category, which will actually be half of the evaluation, this is the thing that's most important to me, is just your argument, what it is you've come to want to say about the play. So that will count as 50%, and the other two will count as 25% each in determining a grade for the final essay. So let me talk a little bit about what I think an essay should do, and this is partly to give you the college perspective on this, even the SLE perspective on this. Even so, at college, different professors might have different things that they care about. And that's why it's important in every class to figure out what it is that the person teaching it wants you to be getting out of the writing part of an assignment. So this is my version of that. So we talk about theses, a thesis for a paper. And the thing I want to say first is that a thesis is the activity of interpretation. You're making an interpretation of the play. So what does that mean to make an interpretation? Well, that's different from getting things right and wrong. It's different than a math evaluation or chemistry where there is an answer. So you're not trying to come up with an answer that is maybe in my head or other people's heads about what things you can and can't say about Antigone. You're going to make your own act of interpretation. Now, why is that true of something like a play? Maybe we get a little philosophical here, but the play itself is made up of words. It's language. And words inherently involve a range of meaning. It's like a cloud of meaning that you're entering as a conversation partner with the play. And so there is no right and wrong in a fixed way, but there's a conversation to enter. When you read a play, you're looking for the meaning. You're looking a little bit behind the words that the characters say. Among the words, there's something going on in the whole of it that you have to put your finger on, because the play itself isn't doing that necessarily. It's inviting you to think in certain ways. So even at the character level, you could think about this as there's a difference between what a character says and what a character means. There's some flexibility there. So Creon's edict, for example, is like a declaration of do not bury that dead body out there or you will die as a result. Pretty clear thing to say, but what does it mean? Maybe has a bigger range. You could, for example, just to use this one example, say that the edict is Creon expressing his power as the new king, that he means to say what I declare goes. So it's not just the law, it's an exercise of power. So you've got an interpretation there. That's the interpretable part. So the goal of this exercise is for you to get into the weeds of an interpretation, something you want to say that you think is going on in the play, that no particular character is saying, but you've become convinced of and you want to share that with your reader. Okay, so that's the thesis. On the evidence side, even though you're interpreting, you can be wrong about things. It's not anything goes. You can't just declare that Antigone says this but means this. You got to persuade the reader of it. And so if you were, for example, try to pick a ridiculous, I think it's ridiculous, interpretation that maybe you want to argue that Antigone wishes she was in charge, that's the secret of understanding what's going on with these interpersonal dynamics in the opening of the play. Antigone wishes she was in charge. You need to convince somebody of that. It's not self-apparent. You have to point at what she says. You have to point at her actions. Maybe one could even make that argument. It's possible, but you, a reader could also think you're wrong about that. Show me the proof. And so it is possible to be wrong even when you're interpreting, and that's on you to persuade your reader of your paper that you're right about your interpretation. So use the words and actions of the play, use quotations, point to what the characters do as evidence for your thesis. And then work to persuade your reader to see it your way. You're basically saying in a thesis, try looking at it this way, or I've started thinking about it this way. Do you see what I mean? You're trying to pull the reader of your paper over to looking at it your way. You might consider counter arguments along the way, for example. And so the last thing I want to say about evidence is to draw a distinction between description and summary, because you may have heard in your writing classes that you're to avoid summary, and that is true to a certain extent. So by distinguishing description from summary, I mean to say that you're going to have to describe things as you go. So you might say in your paper, here's the situation at the beginning. Creon's made this edict. Antigone is responding this way. She says this thing. All descriptive. You're just pointing to the play and you're describing what's happening. But where it becomes summary is when it's not relevant to the interpretation you want to make. So all those things I just said about the play presumably are for me to set up the interpretive thing I want to say. So you describe for the sake of arguments, and when it's no longer for the sake of argument, you've slipped into just summarizing. So I hope that's a helpful distinction. The next thing I want to say is I want to propose a way of thinking about the introduction. I don't know if this fits with what you're learning in your high school writing classes, but it could be something to try. You do not have to do this, but it's something I've personally come to think in my teaching. I've come to think about an essay more and more in this way, and that's about the introduction. The introduction is, to my mind, a one-paragraph version of your paper. So you probably write it at the very end once you've figured out what you actually want to say, and you have one paragraph chance to say, here's what I think is going on in this play, and here's what I think it means. Here's the interpretation I'm making. So you want to do that as well as you can in one paragraph. The rest of the paper is an opportunity to try to persuade your reader of the same thing. So it's just more space to walk through the thing that you did in the introduction. So you might think of the introduction in that way and see if it's helpful. Again, you do not have to do your paper this way. So it's just a suggestion. Finally, I want to say that I hope you learn something in the process of writing the paper. That's really the job of the paper assignment, is precisely for you to see something in the play that you didn't see before or you didn't fully appreciate. So it's not just reporting something you already feel you know. You got to find your way in to thinking about something, and the paper assignment usually is trying to help you do that. But you're hoping to discover something, because if you discover something, it means precisely that there's something you're going to try to share with the reader of your paper that maybe the reader didn't see before. You're sharing a discovery. So the thesis is often that very thing you learn along the way, and you're saying to your reader in the essay, hey, look at this cool thing I started to appreciate by looking at the play more carefully. And you do that in the introduction, and then the reader's thinking, oh, yeah, wow, I didn't quite see it that way. Tell me more. And that's what the rest of the paper is. That's the most important thing to me. Is so that's why the argument part of the mechanics, evidence, and argument is 50% of the grade. I want you to find your way to something that maybe you didn't appreciate at the start. So good luck with it. We have a saying at the class at Stanford. Sounds a little harsh, but it comes, the saying is suffer into truth. And it's actually a line at the end of a Greek tragedy called the Oresteia. So a different Greek tragedy, different Greek playwright, Aeschylus. But the spirit of it is that it takes some work to see into things, suffer into truth. So it can be a bit of a grind to write an essay, but hopefully you see something you didn't see before that will make it worth it. Good luck.